Hello, my name is Eric Anderson. I'm looking to start a new YouTube channel here pretty quick uh, about going from one side of the spectrum to the other of anything about what I know about composting anywhere from to working on vehicles and stuff like that, finding solutions and manufacturers' shortcomings and designs and new ways of thinking new or different ways of thinking about stuff. But today, speaking of shortcomings on some things, I want to show you what I've had to do with my Yamaha. Okay, it turned out to be a really good bike. Once I worked all the kinks out, it runs really good. It starts every time now, but that wasn't always the case. Right off the bat, I was having issues. By the way, I wanted to state this thing is street legal. It's my daily driver. My point of view was, instead of buying a vehicle and just driving it every weekend or every other weekend and that's it, I decided to make it like a dual purpose, so I could ride it off-road and on-road. And this being Arizona, an agricultural state, you can actually ride these on the street if you do a certain amount of things to it. Now, mind you, you might have a difference in opinion between state and federal, so watch out for that stuff. But the kind of stuff that I did was put turn signals on it. You don't necessarily have to do that because you can use your hand signals. But I ended up making a bunch of brackets and stuff, as you can see, for these signals. I did it this way for high visibility. So that's one of the things that I did. Another thing is, this is not the original grill. This is like a mesh screen for airflow, and the reason being is because I had problems when I first had this thing. Couple different things. It was acting like it was wanting to overheat. Now, I had this problem before when I had a YZ450 FT. They had kind of the same issues. When you stopped, you were stopped, it would and had the engine running, it would want to boil over, and the front of the header turned red hot. I thought, because this was newer technology, it wouldn't do that, but it does it the same thing. Now, I tried to take it back to where I bought it, and they said that was normal, that it burned antifreeze and stuff like that, that it weeped, and I didn't think that was normal. So I kind of had to headbutt with them a couple times, but essentially what would happen was I would pull up to a light or my house when I shut the engine off. And of course the engine gets hotter after you turn it off, and liquid would end up weeping out of this, and I would have to end up filling up the coolant essentially every week. So what I did, I narrowed it down, narrowed one thing after another, systematic, probabilities of what would go wrong. So what I did was I rebuilt the water pump. That ended up not being it. So next thing I did, I changed coolant. I did the coolant. I changed it from ethylene glycol to propylene glycol, and that company that I used, their coolant was engine ice. That ended up not working, so I went to a different kind, and it was Evans. It's like a waterless coolant, and supposedly you can take the radiator cap off and try to boil it over, and it won't because it doesn't have any water. So I went back to that type of coolant, or Evans coolant, and I really like that stuff. I like their concepts and all that stuff too. But the biggest thing too was when I would pull up to a light and idle, the clutch cable would get real mushy and it would actually melt. and I would have to keep buying clutch cables. And I finally found out what the problem was. The header, see how it's dual, it's a dual header. It gets really hot, and the clutch cable is so close to it that it would melt it. And also the clutch cable bracket was steel before, and it would actually probably absorb heat and then transfer it to the cable and melt it. Well, I redesigned this out of aluminum to use as a heat sink and hopefully displace the heat, and it does work. This shielding right here is Thermotech Coolit shielding, which is a silicone outside and a fiberglass inside. I put that in a couple different places, and I never, after I did this stuff, I never had a problem with the clutch cable again. So that problem was resolved. What I ultimately had to end up doing was I put an on-demand fan, as you see here. So I could stop at a light or whatever if it was starting to overheat. I put this little switch here, on-demand switch. And not only can you grab the front brake, you can use the throttle, but you can also at the same time. Okay. There's a couple other different things I did. I did a speedometer with the odometer, RPM gauge. It has your coolant temperature. I actually put an alarm on. I'll show you that. Let me turn this off first. I'll show you. I can actually lock it and unlock it. So anyways, turn that back on. And I also put a horn and a turn signals and a tail light, or a license plate light on it. So this thing, when I used to turn it on, it would stumble and shut off. And I found out, I took it back to the dealership, and it was an intermittent problem, and ended up being, after doing some research work, I narrowed it down to this thing called a clutch switch, and it goes right in this hole in the clutch. So when you pull the clutch in, when you pulled up to a light, you pull the clutch in and it would engage the switch and the engine would shut off. So what I did is I pulled it out and I put some heat shrink tubing on it, and it's like a little switch. And ever since then, I never had any problems with my engine dying. Another thing I had done to this was I made in unison, a 4-stage air filter. That's what you're seeing with this cutout. I put in a new computer, which probably gained about 9 to 12 horsepower, and that was dyno tested and tuned. Another thing I did was I put in an exhaust, well, an exhaust pipe, I should say. But I also designed these turn signal brackets and a license plate bracket, whatever you want to call it, to hold the license plate bracket and to where you can kind of swivel it. But anyways, another shortcomings was when I got this thing, this disc was warped and it would never adjust correctly. When I did adjust it, it would wear out the pads because it was warped so bad, and it would squeal and stuff like that. So I took that off, and Yamaha got me twice. So I had to buy another one. Luckily it was flat. I put it on and I've never had a problem ever since then. Okay. So I hate to say it, but this thing has never been off-road. I know, which is a sin, but hopefully sometime soon I'll be able to take it off-road or whatever. But also back then, I don't know if I said this already, but it had DOT approved like street tires on it, and they were pretty cool. They don't have them on now. But one more a couple more shortcomings from Yamaha was the chain rollers. Their original one was made of like polypropylene or something like that, and wore out real quick. So I decided to make it out of Delrin, and it works really good. I've had the same one on there for quite some time. But as you can see, I've done some of this stuff, put this stuff here on these oil lines and stuff like that. And here's the fan again. Okay, on demand. This is the new kind of coolant that I put in it. Works really good. And yeah, essentially, you know, I think I said this before, but this is a YFM 700R SEDL. I've tried to talk to people about this, and they say, oh, 700, and I'm like, it's really not that fast compared to my 450, because it had titanium valves and all that stuff, and that thing was a freaking beast. And it was a two-wheeler, so less weight, and it had a lot of power. And they don't believe me when I say I was scared of the other bike. I'm not really scared of this. So, but anyways, those were some of the shortcomings from Yamaha that I wanted to show you, and modifications that I did. You know, it's a really nice bike after you get over those issues. Sorry, it's so hot in here, sweating. Yeah, you can actually make these things street legal, but like I said, you know, the state might say one thing and the feds will say another, so be wary of that. I just couldn't see the point in just owning these and running it one weekend out of the year or whatever, or out of the month. I had to have like a dual purpose, so I did all this stuff. I don't know if I mentioned this either, but I actually had to, another shortcoming was manufacturer defect in the radiator. I actually had to take it back, or not take it back, I had to buy another one, because here's the thing. When you're buying a radiator from it had a hole in it. After a certain amount of time, a little puncture came out of it. And this, like I said, this thing's never been off-road. I've never abused this thing. Well, it had a hole. It started leaking. And so anyways, I just decided to buy a new one. And the thing is with Yamaha, when you buy a radiator, you have to buy a fan too with it, because it comes on it. So I had to do that too. So, you know, I've had quite a few problems with this thing, but like I said, you know, finally now it's all tuned in, tuned up, and I'll show you right now how it runs. So that's it. You know, like I said, I'm starting a new YouTube channel, and I'm doing everything in between, from one end of the spectrum to the other. And if you will, please leave a like, thumbs up, and try to subscribe to my channel, and hopefully I can help people more and come up with some cool, different or new things, and you know, really have some fun too. I appreciate it. Have a good one.